Hello, everyone. I'm Nicolle Praino, the editor-in-chief of the Nashville Post, and today we are sitting here to talk about finance and innovation, specifically Fintech, for our Innovation and Ideas digital series. I'll let you three introduce yourselves. Go ahead.
Well, Nicolle, thanks for having us. I'm David Briggs, and I have the privilege of serving as Tennessee Regional President for Fifth Third Bank.
Thank you for having me. I'm Karl Sprules. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of AllianceBernstein.
And I'm David Malone. I am the entrepreneur in residence at the Nashville Entrepreneurs Center.
Thank you guys all for being here. I have some individual questions for each of you, and then we'll get into questions for everyone, but feel free to jump in where it's appropriate. What are you seeing from local startups, Dave, and the Fintech world from the ground up? We'll start there.
Yeah, sure. From the ground up, we're seeing a lot of activity. I think financial technology really brings innovation and automation to lots of different core specific end users. Mostly I see that in what I call bank tech. A lot of technology going into financial institutions, both on a consumer level and at a commercial or SaaS-based model. In Nashville, we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing more business move into Nashville. It doesn't have to be done on the coast. I think people realize that. There's more capital in Nashville than there was, 20 years ago when, I was a co-founder of a company. And because of those things, there's a lot of talent that's here. And I think that's positive for the city.
Yeah. What are some of the challenges?
I think challenge-wise, from a pure tech development perspective, I still think we struggle a little bit. That can be perception more than reality, but I think it's there. I'd have to think about that one. I got to cut that for a little bit.
You were going to say something.
Yeah, Nicolle, one thing I would just add is really kind of a point of history and reference I think your readers could find interesting. But so much of what's happened in Nashville has become from a byproduct of very concerted efforts. So
Sure.
the chamber
that actually got us here.
Yeah, exactly. AllianceBernstein
how sort of deliberate the growth has been.
And to that point, time will escape me, but call it a decade ago, the chamber really had a study that showed, hey, the growth sectors are going to be information technology, and we like the demographics of those jobs. So let's have a very concerted effort of attracting that kind of talent in industry. So I even remember the campaign was Nashville, the IT city, playing on kind of that front, but IT meaning information technology. So much of this was all very much from a planned basis.
I think to your question about challenges, right? It's still talent pipeline is a big thing, right? So whether that's everybody graduating high school with some exposure to STEM, I think that's a big thing. I think infrastructure is still we've grown so quickly, infrastructure to support that growth. So it's all the classic stuff, right? It's housing, transport, it's access to schools. And I think the other thing is, Nashville's been really successful in attracting businesses, but you need to keep that going, right? If you're moving people here, which we're going to need to do if we really want to build the tech depth here, they need to have options, right? They need to have options to grow. They need options for their spouses to go work at, their kids when they graduate, they need places to go. So I think there's sort of three challenges there that we could all sort of lean into.
Yeah. Each of you individually kind of do something a little different, but all within the same world. Kind of start with you and talk about how Fintech specifically is working in your business.
Yeah, from a banking perspective, it's very important. What's the saying? Not where the puck is, but where the puck is going. And we're a little bit unique at Fifth Third in that our CEO birthed two fintechs. So typically CEOs of banks come through traditional banking in some form or fashion. So we're different in that regard. And as a result, we've made a lot of strategic investments with fintech companies. And even our core checking product is really modeled after a fintech play. So for instance, has the benefits of getting your paycheck available 2 days before a normal bank product. The ability to control overdrafts and manage that front. Yet at the same sense, we're going to build another 20 financial centers here in Tennessee over the next 18 to 24 months. So we believe that combination of technology and fintech, yet still the human aspect of bricks and mortar.
Karl?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would arguably say we are a fintech company, right? Technology and operations is the biggest part of our business. Those things sort of materialize in probably two areas. One is more recent in AI, and the other is probably more long-term in automation. On the AI side of things, last year we appointed a chief AI officer, so someone with 30 years of experience in our business, someone who'd been an investor, a risk manager, also an adjunct professor at Cornell, so like someone with real depth, and we put that person on our operating committee. We have a whole AI governance program, which we've put in place to sort of put some guardrails around how we use it. And then we have a long history of using all different types of AI. So whether it's the traditional analytical AI, which really is about getting signal from the noise, whether it's really some of the things we've done in NLP, where it's communicating with machines on a more human sort of natural language basis, or more recently with a sort of generative AI, where we've sort of encouraged everybody in the organization to say that if you're starting anything with a blank sheet of paper, you should be doing it with the generative AI. And then just really recently, we've started getting some real success with some of these deep reasoning models. So most of those tools I talked about were really on the periphery of our business, but the core thing of what we do is we manage money for other people. We pick winners and losers in the markets, and we're starting to see those tools really helping in the research process. So that's on the AI side, and then automation is a big thing for us, like I'm sure it is for you. Like one of the things we noticed a long time ago, sort of 20 years ago, was that long-running or cross-departmental processes tend to fail, and so we put a lot of effort into building automation around those things.
Yeah, and I'd say at the NEC, we really want to see Nashville, as Sam says, as a great city to grow and start a business. So for Project Fintech, which is where my focus is really helping startup businesses come in, gain access to capital if needed, gain access to contacts if needed, gain access to mentorship if needed, programming if needed. How can we look at the greater Nashville community and have organizations like AB and Fifth Third and others who participate in the NEC? How can we help these really good ideas? How can we help them grow, and how can we help them scale? That's what we're trying to do.
Where do you see the biggest demand right now? Is it in banking? I think you kind of mentioned that before.
I think there's a lot of bank tech. I mean, a lot of people are always trying to sell into financial services broadly, right? If it's brokerage or commercial banking or even consumer banking, there's a lot of that from a pure play perspective.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other opportunities more so for growth that you see, places that they should be focusing?
Well, when I say bank tech, that's broad, right? So there's a lot of ways to go. I mean, I've looked at businesses that are in payments, cards. I've looked at businesses that are in back office operations. How do we become more efficient in just day-to-day validation task? Consumer apps, right? A lot of financial technology is consumer focused, and I want to be just in an app because I've got a community bank out there that doesn't have the dollars to invest in that. And so there are platforms that if I can get in, I can offer that to my customers that ultimately want it. And I do think there's some demographics in play there. While I'm not going to do a lot of banking on my phone, my children are. And the financial institutions got to be able to play in that space on a go-forward basis.
And look, I think there's a great marriage, and I'll just give one as an example to Dave's point. Company we invested in called Provide. So had built a app and a technology around largely veterinarians, optometrists, heavy capital related arenas that are very fragmented. And a traditional bank, you're scouring all the tax returns, you're getting personal financials, I mean, a lot of paperwork to come up with a decision. Their app, within input to decision, was like 20 minutes. So huge opportunity for our client base. But on the flip side, they hadn't built out a national sales team. So partnering with a bank allows a sales force that have these connections to have a better experience for your clients, another tool in the toolbox, so to speak. So there's a lot of synergies.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of times where folks think that it's banks or traditional firms competing with fintech. There's certainly some of that, but I think there's a lot more room for the synergies than competition side of it.
Yeah, I agree. And to your question of opportunity, I think the round of sort of fintech folks we're seeing now are very much AI enabled.
Yeah.
And that's whether that's reducing efficiency or unlocking data insights. Those are the sort of folks that we're seeing knocking on our door right now.
Speaking to those partnerships, how do you find them? Do they come to you?
So I think there's a combination. We actually have a group that we work with that helps us source and scour and find folks that would be good strategic investments and partnerships on that regard. And then there's a lot that just know from a Fifth Third perspective that we have a history of partnering and investing in fintechs. So that perpetuates itself to some degree. And then those of us all scattered in our geographies, when we come across these businesses through an NEC or other alternatives, then we oftentimes will bubble it up and see if there's an opportunity or a right fit as our folks that are planning our strategic plays for technology comes into play.
How do you guys help foster some of those partnerships?
Well, our businesses are pretty small, right? They're in their early days. And so really we have a mentorship program, which I think is outstanding. And if you talk to any of the businesses that have graduated from the cohorts, would tell you it's been very worthwhile. So what I think makes Nashville a really great place is you got a lot of people that have been successful in various businesses that are willing to jump back in and mentor young companies. So through that mentorship, not just at the NEC, but through representatives of the NEC, how can we help you introduce to this opportunity? Maybe it's a bank connection just for a simple commercial banking, or maybe it's a business that is a partner that can really help you grow. So we do it through various programs that we offer at the NEC.
Yeah, I think Dave's right. This whole mentoring front, when we've had the privilege of living and having our family in Tennessee now for 25 years. I remember when we first moved here, people would talk about how friendly it is. And I kind of discounted that because what else are you going to say? But it really is incredibly friendly. And from a business environment, my personal conjecture is I think so many of these firms, if you look at the Nashville healthcare tree, and every year they have to get smaller and smaller font because it's out of page paper size. But I think most folks at some point in their time were early stage and they tremendously valued others taking their call or mentoring. So CEOs of large companies are very available to talk to folks if you show and take that initiative. When you look at our civic and community involvement, it is high-powered execs on these various boards. That's very unique to Nashville. And so I think it plays to our strengths in incubating new endeavors and new businesses here.
I very much agree with your point. It's a very friendly place, very easy place to do business. From our perspective, when we think about partnering with early stage companies, it's really about, do they understand our regulatory framework? Do they understand our challenges? But then it's what can we do to help them understand our problems so that they can develop those solutions.
Correct.
Yeah, I was going to ask too, how does Nashville specifically fit into AB's strategy, finding tech and innovation?
Yeah, so it's our headquarters, as you know. So tech, ops, AI, they're all driven from here. We've brought a lot of roles to Nashville, over 1,000 roles. We brought over 200 people from New York. Many of those have engineering backgrounds. And then we've tried to lean into the community, whether it's the Nashville Technology Council, a software school. We teach high school robotics in a bunch of different high schools in town. We've tried to really in any way we can, lean into building the sort of the tech center here and making Nashville really a place where you'd want to go if you're a technologist, which I think is important for what we were talking about earlier. We've got to grow the talent pool.
What makes finance and technology go together so well? Because we're sitting here talking about both kind of at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I was my first roles weren't in finance. I'm an engineer by trade, but I was more in product engineering. And I think one of the reasons that drew me to finance is just the scale of the problem, right? It's massive amounts of data, it's massive amounts of automation. It was the place when I was a young engineer that had, the most access to capital. It had the biggest problems to solve, and I think that's still true today.
Not that it needs to be said to further date myself, but Karl and Dave wouldn't remember the time when the internet was birthed. And before that,
I know I would.
I remember one of the first epiphanies I had was, prior to the internet, you used a broker, as they were called back then. If you wanted information to invest in a company, you had to contact a broker to send you that information or go to the library. If you wanted to invest in a company, you had to call a broker to be able to invest. When the internet came out, my thought was, oh my goodness, brokers are out of business. Well, what happened, obviously, is they have pivoted to financial advisors, because now it's not a matter of getting information. It's how do I make sense of this? There's just a plethora of information. So how do I make sense of it? How do I make sure I'm allocating correctly? So the industry had to pivot. And I think we'll see the same thing as AI and other tools become more prevalent and change the way we all operate. There's still going to be a need, or I bet heavily on the need for personal interaction.
Right.
And at the end of the day, this will all be additive and helpful.
Yeah.
But it's still that human connect of figuring it out and making sense of it and giving that true advice. I think will never be substituted.
Yeah, I agree with that. We have a wealth management business both nationally, but also here in Nashville, and we believe very much that there's always a person at the end of a conversation. Right? It's the apps are important, the website's important, all of the data that we can provide people are great, but it's a relationship with your advisor at the end of the day that matters.
Yeah, we're asked frequently, why do we continue to invest and build in financial centers when, Dave and Karl, to the earlier point, our kids are only going to bank on their phone. Data still suggests one of the highest factors of where somebody has their primacy accounts is proximity to a financial center.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if something goes wrong with that app, you don't want to call 1-800 I don't care. You want to grab Dave and say, fix this thing, help.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And in many cases, there is that, right? The app, there's something happens with the app. But invariably, something happens in their life or something happens in the market. And in that point, you want to talk to somebody, right? And that's when humans become very important. How do you make sense, to your point earlier, how do you find the signal from the noise?
How do you make meaningful connections between startups and legacy companies? We've touched on several different aspects of this.
I think just talked about it. I mean, I think the larger institutions that are here, they've got to engage, right? And they do it from a help. Let me teach you to understand what I need and what is the regulatory environment and frameworks, because if you don't understand those things as an entrepreneur, it can become very, very challenging just to weed your way through the process. Regulated entities, calling on them is challenging. They can only do so much. So you have to understand that. So from a NEC or small entrepreneur perspective, it's having the large organizations engage and help those young companies where they can. So if you're at the NEC or if it's sponsorships or representatives down there, those are the things that I think really can help the community grow.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're talking about is this mismatch between, like this impedance mismatch between small companies and large companies, right? One of the things that we've sort of focused on at AB is to try and avoid that, right? It's to try and feel more like a startup. Like we had a move to Nashville. alone here in a WeWork suite, right? And before we built all this out, right? So we hired a lot of people that had that sort of startup feel. We build a lot of new businesses and services, and we try and do those in small groups of people that actually do feel like a startup. And so try and avoid that mismatch entirely if we can.
I think it's also about making the connections. We talked about that earlier, Nicolle, but for instance, I had a lunch on Friday with a smaller company that helped me understand of how they were helping this particular industry. And I asked them, hey, are you aware of this company that happens to be a client on that? They weren't. And so there's nothing better to then make an introduction, because at the end of the day, none of us want to be in the commodity business. So how do you differentiate yourself? And part of it is leading with advice and connectivity. So there's nothing we like taking to a commercial client than an idea for a business investment, or here's talent that's looking for a role. And that's not on our suite of products or offerings, but if you differentiate yourself that way, then you distinguish yourself from being a commodity play, which none of us want to be.
To wrap up, one final question. If Nashville wants to be a true fintech leader nationally, what do we still need to build?
Homes.
If we're going with a single line, I would say talent pipeline. Like, we need more talent.
Yeah, it's just pipeline, right? And businesses that are successful that you can speak to, right? Company X was a successful business that was started, grown, launched in Nashville. If they could do it, why can't somebody else do that? I also think, as we continue to grow, Oracle is going to be down there. It's going to bring in talent. That's 8 years, 10 years out. But you got to be able to support that when they get here as well. They're going to employ a lot of people. So 2 things: successful businesses, people come, stay, invest, and give back.
We've heard this stat numerous times, but the Chamber likes to point out that if unemployment in Middle Tennessee was 0, there'd still be 31,000 jobs unfilled. So that's a reason why 100 people a day continue to move here and become our neighbors. And if we want to continue to attract this talent, not only do we have to have the jobs and the companies here, but we need to have that infrastructure Karl touched on earlier. And look, this is the Chamber has just finished its next 5-year iteration of Plan 2030 now. This is the first time that housing and affordability has been a headwind, not a tailwind for us. So if it was easy solved, we'd already had it, but we need to just continue to have more focus on just our core infrastructure.
Thank you guys all for being here today and for the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Cheers.
Enjoyed it, guys.